Hey, it's the Direct Response Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Ketchum, founder of Campaign Refinery, joined today, as always, by David Cartolano from Wealthy Inbox. Hey, man, thanks for being here.
Hey, happy to be here, Travis.
So, this one was a really hot topic a few years ago, and continues to be, in my opinion, pretty misunderstood from a lot of emailers' perspective, and that is Apple's Mail Privacy Protection, or MPP for short. But we're going to keep calling it, privacy protection, probably. But David, when you think of Apple's Mail Privacy Protection, what kind of like gut feeling comes to mind? And then what kind of logical feeling comes to mind?
Gut feeling is, oh shit, now I can't make decisions based on certain metrics. The logic that comes to mind, though, is follow the principles, give the customers what they want, and go off the data that you have as best as you can.
Yeah, I think that's a great, nice, succinct way to kick this off. So if it's cool with you, I want to sort of dive into what the hell is Apple's Mail Privacy Protection? Why does it exist? And then what does it mean for you as an emailer? And I know you'll have your own interpretations on this as we go
Yeah,
along. So
yeah, go for
at
it.
its core, this was something that Apple announced as part of Apple Mail, which is a client that is available on the Mac, on the iPad, on iPhone, and it is by far the most popular client on those platforms, which happen to be dominant, particularly in wealthy countries, or what this is going to sound condescending, but a lot of ad buyers call them, tier one countries. So you talk about, North America, so that's Canada, US, then you have UK, Europe, Australia, right? Apple has really high penetration there for upper income earners, right? And within those platforms, this is the default mail app that comes on the phone. So a lot of people are adding their email address into that because even if you don't want to use that mail client, even as the thing you view emails on or reply on, like for instance, I use a different mail client as my go-to, but I still have my email hooked into that because it's nice to have the knowledge for Siri or the other sort of smart integration, automatic stuff that can happen on these platforms if they have access to your inbox to know about what's going on. Now, mailbox privacy protection is another brick in the pavement here for Apple as they continue to try to abstract away tracking. Like we first saw this initiative with Safari, and they did all kinds of crazy things with apps because basically a bunch of businesses are being creepy and they're tracking too much, right? To the point that Apple can't even tell apps a specific battery percentage because ad networks were being weird and saying, well, if we see a device between these two cell towers that has 87.1% battery, and they move to the next cell tower and they have 87.0% battery, we know it's probably the same user. Like that level of
Oh
tracking is
boy.
creepy, right? And so Apple does things to try to add space and padding and abstract away that a little bit so that you as the user have more of your own information to yourself. And as a user myself, I think that's great. But there's one key problem with what they did here with mailbox privacy protection. What they tried to do and what they've effectively done is they've made the user opening an email no longer directly reported that it was a human interaction. Now, the benefits for a user is that means that the sender doesn't know that you specifically opened an email, when you opened the email, where you opened the email, right? And a lot of other items that you can consider intrusive. And that I understand to a degree. But the problem is it's actually at odds with their own webmaster guidance. Because Apple, along with Google and Yahoo and all the major providers, they will tell you that the number one thing they expect from you as a sender is that you stop sending to people who aren't opening and clicking your emails. Now,
Yep.
here's the rub, right? If you can't see who opened your emails, how are you supposed to comply with their webmaster guidelines?
Mm-hmm.
Gets kind of difficult, don't you think? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
aren't opens one of the biggest filters you use, David, when you are working on lists and managing your own email?
Yeah. Yeah, opens are really, really important and really, really unreliable. And I know this might go outside of the privacy protection, the like privacy stuff going on, but even clicks are becoming less trustworthy as well. So as technology gets better, the more it can emulate human behavior. But for now, yes, opens are very important. Even if you can't trust them, you still got to use them. You still got to hedge them against verified clicks and say like, okay, does that number make sense? Like, can I trust that somebody's actually opening this? If they're opening it multiple times, then yes, there's probably a real human behind it. But if this one person is opening every email, but they only open it once, exactly 5 minutes after you send it, that's probably not an active subscriber. So that's what I think about. It gives me a little knot in my stomach, but also we can't control things in life. We have to adapt to them.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get a little bit nerdy for a second, but hopefully people don't just glaze over because I want to help people understand how does open tracking work. And when you understand how open tracking works, you'll understand how mailbox privacy protection works, and you can make a more educated decision on what the data means. So open tracking, essentially what it is, us emailers have been including essentially a little invisible 1 pixel by 1 pixel image in every email. So if it has any HTML at all, it has this one little tiny pixel. And open tracking is saying that image was requested by a device and loaded because it was opened, right? It had to render the image in the device. Therefore, the server had a call and said, hey, I would like that image, please. And then you knew that email was open because the image was called. And then that device also usually tells you it was called at 11:23 a.m. and it was by a device with this IP address, and that IP address can help you sort of like roughly center where they are, not necessarily to the exact address, sometimes that, but even just like a general city or general geographical area. Now, the way mailbox privacy protection works to break this is that the local device downloads a copy of your image once, and then when the user actually opens the email, and no matter how many times they open the email, it will be served from their device instead of from your server. So what that means is the email sending server sees one open one time. It identifies itself as Apple bot, right? And it uses an Apple IP address somewhere random like Cupertino, not necessarily where the user actually is. And then it will cache that on the device. So that means you as the sender can only tell that it at least inboxed, because they don't do this for stuff that goes to spam. That's the only real cut filter you have. Now, you can currently still track clicks, so that is a good extra layer to add on to try to do some of that filtering. But a lot of people sort of posed this question when this technology came out is, okay, well, if you're going to see an inflation in opens, which is true, should you just ignore all of them? And a lot of platform providers have thrown them out. Now, I equate this to throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because just because a human open is no longer clear, it's abstracted away, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So that means that pretty much the only guarantee here is that human opens are happening. You just don't know what percentage of those robot opens ultimately become human opens. So my sort of rule of thought here is you should include them in your opener segments, but you should additionally be more judicious about trying to get people to click and removing people who don't click, right? And then once you do that, then okay, we're still going to have a little bit of float here. We're still going to have a little bit of creep on our metrics compared to before. And now that just means we move our benchmark from what used to be, 20, 25% floor to 30 to 40% floor, right? To account for the additional robot opens that are probably packed in there to still be within bounds of real human openers. Because you know what? Apple's going to know that a human opened. Email's going to know that a human opened. They've got other ways of figuring this out that they're not going to tell you or me as a sender, but they know. They always know, right? And so as long as you are accounting for a higher benchmark, that will offset the often 10 to 15% float you're going to see from these robotic opens. Now, one last piece I want to clarify here on the technical aspect. It does not have to be an Apple email address. It just has to be using the Apple Mail client. So that means you're going to see this creep on every single type of internet service provider that you send to. So Google, Yahoo, Comcast, like Roadrunner. I mean, like you name it. Any email service provider out there that is able to be added to Apple Mail, you pretty much have to assume that it will be added to Apple Mail because people love having email on their phone, especially business people. And this technology doesn't care that it's a Gmail address because it's a client thing. It's not a server-side thing, right? So once you know that, you have to know that it's evenly applied across the board. Of course, an Apple email address is probably even more likely to be added to Apple Mail for an Apple user. And so we do see an even higher float there, but we do see float across the board. Now, the other thing that this introduces is sort of two things, in my opinion. One is Your countdown timers, when this is enabled, will break because the way the countdown timers work is they're loading it in real time as a request. And what this means is they will only load from the time that it got cached in the device, not the real time that your offer might be ending. And the second thing is you can no longer trust time of opens because the way that mailbox privacy protection tries to work, because Apple's very conscious about spending battery budget, since most of their consumers are on battery powered devices, they tend to do this caching when the device is plugged in or on a MagSafe charging and on Wi-Fi. So if they haven't checked their email in several hours and they go to bed and they slap their phone down on their charger and they go to bed for the night, in the background, that's when the device is going to cache the email that you sent. So you might be seeing opens in the middle of the night, and you would, not be crazy to think, man, everyone opens my emails at 12:30 a.m. This is incredible. I know exactly when to send my email so that they get the maximum number of opens. But that would be a false canary in the coal mine. This is not what you're aiming for. You need to think more about what is the avatar of my user, what is the actual time zone they're in, when are they actually interacting with this, and aim for that time, right? So if you have a lot of North American-based people, a lot of people sort of try to base off of Eastern time zone. So sometime, more mid-morning, early morning, Eastern time zone tends to be a popular sending time. But know that you cannot trust the timestamp of when the open occurred because of these robotic opens.
Yeah.
To recap, I think you should still include the robotic opens. I think they are generally a good thing for consumers, even if they make our lives harder as email senders. And you cannot trust the timestamp of the human opens, and then you should add an additional filter you didn't before, looking for clickers, and you should raise the minimum open rate that you're shooting for as a sender. So I know that this is really a mouthful of me talking the most here, David, but if you want to share any experience or anything that I may have missed, I'd love to hear it. But I think this is one of the most overblown things by marketers that are just ready to just cut bait and throw out a huge portion of their list. It's wild to me.
Yeah. I mean, marketers are kind of like, I live in New York City, so marketers remind me of a lot of people who proclaim the end is coming in Times Square. With every new technological update, you would think that they need to switch religions and social security numbers. When in my experience, and Travis, obviously you have a much wider breadth of information and experience behind this, given your experience and what you do. And for me, who feels like a first grader when I hear all of this, my rules of thumb are they pretty much reflect what you say. You keep the open rates as high as possible and assume that that open rate is a lie. So if I have an email, if I'm sending out emails to a list and I'm getting a 50% open rate, I'm like, okay, that's good. That's a good floor. My floor really is 40%. If I get below 40%, I'm pissed. I'm like, something's wrong here. There's a deliverability issue. There's a subject line problem. Maybe there's a targeting issue, but 40% is 40%. I feel like 40% is the new, it's the new 20% it was back in the 2010s.
So to be clear, we have an acceptable use policy, which is the minimum guidelines that people have to meet to be able to continue to send on our platform. And for us, the floor is 30%. If you're below 30%, we start ringing the alarm bells and you are at risk of getting kicked off. Competing platforms, we've looked at their stats, their floor is usually 15%. So,
man, they don't even reinforce the floor that they say. Believe me.
Yeah.
Believe me.
So I agree. When I'm sending to my own list, or our top performing customers are usually solidly high 40s, if not pushing into the 60% range as their intended target, and that's when they're in that zone, good things happen. But our floor, if you want to participate with email the way that we believe should be done, the absolute minimum in our view is 30% to be within compliance. That's not overachieving. That's just we won't kick you off.
Yeah. And I know there's some people that they have this idea in their mind that the bigger your list gets, well, it's natural the open rate goes down. That's not true at all. I know I have a newsletter right now that on average is well above 70% open rates, and a newsletter I'm looking at to acquire that has many, many, many subscribers on it has the same open rate, 70%, around there. And I really do think it is an industry thing, but it also is an intention thing. You know, if a lot of people aren't opening and you're getting 20% opens or 30% opens, even with this privacy stuff going on, you have to ask yourself, well, maybe only 15% of people are opening my emails. Okay, maybe it's time to clean my list. Maybe it's time to get rid of the subscribers that only seem to be opening once, but they're never clicking. They're never doing nothing. They're never replying. They're just kind of there. Maybe it's because they're actually not there and
Well, even
they're
if they
already
are
checked
there,
out.
are they valuable? Is
Yeah.
the, is the next fair question to have.
I
And
told a client recently, most people unsubscribe. They just don't click the link to do it. Yeah.
yeah,
Let
to
that
check
sink
out.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to give you an idea, I agree. As people have this sort of misnomer of as you scale up, you can give up some of that ground. I mean, to put in perspective, on our last billion emails we delivered, our average unique open rate was right about 50%
See. Yep.
across the platform. So, and we've got some of our higher performing people that have huge lists, millions and millions of people on their list, sending, 50, 60 million emails a month on a single domain, average unique open rate, 57, 58%, like clockwork. So
Yep.
it's definitely doable. It comes down to discipline. Now, all right, just bring it all the way back to mailbox privacy protection though. What do you think? Like, are you pro, against? Do you have any feelings either way about this feature?
I think companies that oftentimes sell privacy aren't actually selling privacy. But that's like, get me intoxicated at 3 a.m. and I'll tell you how I really feel. Uh, but really, for me, it's another bump in the road. I think people should have a right to privacy, so go for it. Like, yeah. And as a marketer, adapt. Don't cry about it. Figure it out. Talk with people. And then again, if you're doing right by customers, this sort of stuff doesn't matter as much. Just hire an expert, course correct just a little bit, and then continue as you continue. If you're banking on open rates to save your business, you probably don't have a business to begin with. I'm sorry. So yeah, Apple's going to do this. Uh, and any big tech company is going to make waves, and it's up to you to ride them or drown in them. So for me, I'm pretty neutral guy on this, Travis. For me, it's just like, all right, just it's another inning. Like let's figure out how to get a home run either way.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think that this is a trend that will continue, and it will continue to be more complex and more challenging. But like one of my sort of personal mantras is, don't get mad, get better.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Just get better. Adapt, get better, send better content, send better offers, get better quality leads, and life will be
Yeah.
better in general. So
Yeah.
cool. All right. Well, if you want to read more about it on a continually updating piece of content that my wonderful content team keeps up to date on the latest shifts about specifically Apple mailbox privacy protection, because this is a thing that, every year WWDC, Apple announces some new feature kind of thing. And I don't think that the story here is done or complete. This is obviously recorded at a set period in time, but the article down below is sort of your reference material going forward. Check that out. And if you want to have an email service provider that doesn't lie to you about your analytics and tries to encourage you to do things the right way and give you the power and data to make those decisions the right way, and has everyone else on the platform doing things the right way or else they get kicked off, check out Campaign Refinery down below. And David, what's good?
Yeah, if you are in the newsletter space and you're just looking for tips on how to build a more valuable newsletter, you can go to wealthyinbox.news and there's plenty of stuff there for you to check out.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, David. And I hope you guys learned something about mailbox privacy protection and you can don't get mad, get better. Catch you guys later.